to be a coral reef trying to expand, selecting shapes and colors to score the most pattern points? Do you want to learn how to play reef?
In this video, we're going to take you through the full rules for this game, and if you stay tuned till the end, you can pick up some tips and strategies along the way. Coming up. Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University, bringing you a variety of quality board game videos. On this channel we do a lot of overview, review, playthrough, vlog and how to play, just like this one.
So if you're new here, please consider subscribing and do hit the bell to be notified of when we post new videos.
Now let's get to the rules of Reef, game by Emerson Matsuuchi, published by Next Move Games.
Reef is a pattern building game for 2 to 4 players. During the game, players will be taking cards from a display and then playing those cards in order to place the matching coral onto their boards, and then ultimately score points for matching the patterns on the cards they play. The game plays in this manner with players building up their reefs in 3 dimensions until one colour of coral is gone, or the deck runs out of cards, and the player with the most points wins. To set up the game, sort all the coral pieces into matching piles. You'll use all the pieces in a 4-player game, remove 4 of each colour in a 3-player game, and remove a total of 10 of each colour in a 2-player game. This will change the length of the game depending on the number of players. Each player takes a player board and then 1 coral piece of each of the 4 colours, which are placed on the central 4 spaces in whatever order the player wishes. Each player also takes 3 victory points, and the deck of cards is shuffled up, and 2 are dealt to each player. Whoever player board has the starfish on it will be the first player. The rest of the reef deck is placed face up, and then 3 cards are dealt from the top like so. You're now ready to play. Starting with the player with the starfish board and then going clockwise from there, each player will take 1 action on each turn. There are 2 choices for the player action. The player can either take a card from the display, with the card immediately replaced for the next player, or the player may play a card from his or her hand, discarding it face up, in order to place the 2 coral pieces shown on that card, then score points if the pattern shown on the player's card matches any patterns in the reef. Players will go round and round the table, taking 1 action at a time in this manner until the end of the game is triggered by 1 colour of coral running out from the supply, or this deck of cards emptying. The round will be finished so that all players have the same number of turns, and whoever has the most points wins. So now let's look at each of these options in detail, starting with taking cards. To take a card, a player may choose any one of the 3 face-up cards that are not on top of the deck for free, simply taking the card and adding it to his or her hand. After doing this, the card empty space is replaced with the top card from this deck. Alternatively, the player may choose the top card from the deck. However, doing this comes at the cost of 1 victory point, which the player must place onto one of the cards in the display, which shows the lowest number of points in the bottom right corner. This point would later be taken by the player who drew that card from the display. A player's hand limit in Reef is 4 cards, and so if the player already has 4 cards, he or she cannot take a card from the display and must play a card for his or her turn. So now we'll look at how to play cards. To play a card, the player takes a card from his or her hand and then plays it face up into a personal discard pile. Then the player must first place 2 pieces of coral onto his or her player board, matching what's shown on the top half of the card. After placing coral, the player may try to score the pattern on the bottom of the card. To place coral, the player takes the 2 coral pieces and may then place them anywhere onto his or her player board. This can include onto empty spaces or on top of other pieces of coral. The only restriction is that a single stack of coral cannot be higher than 4 pieces. So a stack of 4 would be okay, but a stack of 5 would not be. Placing coral is not optional, and when a card has two differently coloured pieces of coral, they may be placed in either order. Then you will attempt to score the pattern. Patterns are made by looking at the coral that is on top of your reef. This is an example of the simplest pattern in the game. It's worth 1 point for every stack that is topped by a red piece of coral. In this case, the player would gain 3 points. This red piece does not count towards the total because it's been covered by a purple. Slightly more complicated than this is a pattern which requires multiple stacks topped by the same or different colours to be in a certain configuration. Here, for example, the player will score 3 points for a purple orthogonally adjacent to a red. The pattern can be matched by rotating this in whatever direction the player wishes. However, each stack of coral can be counted in a pattern only once. So, in this case, the player would gain 3 points for this one, 3 points for this one, but could not double up on here or here, and therefore would gain a total of 6 points. For patterns of this type, the height of the stacks doesn't matter. And there are several different versions of this type of pattern, which players may encounter during the game. Some of the patterns in the game will show a number, and these refer to stacks which are specifically of that height. In this case here, the player would gain 1 point for every stack that is exactly 2 coral pieces high. This one would grant 4 points for a stack of coral exactly 3 pieces high, which is topped by a purple. It's important to note that once a piece of coral has been covered, it can no longer be scored in this sort of a pattern. For example, green is the second coral in this particular column, but it's no longer on top of the stack, so it cannot be scored in this pattern. Some patterns in the game will combo together multiple stacks that are above minimum height of a matching colour. So this one would score 5 points for 2 coral stacks of 2 height, both topped with yellow. Some more complicated visual patterns show a number with a plus, and in this case the stack needs to simply meet or exceed that height, not be exactly that height. Here the player would gain 5 points for a purple and a red, which are diagonally adjacent and with both stacks at least 2 high. So here the player could score this pair and this pair, although not this pair because this one is too low. The final type of pattern in the game is one which looks like this. To score this, find your highest stack which matches the type shown in the center of the square. So in this case it's this 4 height purple stack. Then score 2 points for each coral stack of the matching color here that is in the 8 spaces surrounding that stack. So here from this coral there is 1, 2, 3 greens surrounding it, and therefore 6 points. Note that the player must use the tallest stack of this middle type, even if there's another stack on the board which would score more points. If the player has a tie for the tallest type of stack, then he or she may choose the most advantageous stack. The end of the game can be triggered in one of 2 ways. Either if the draw deck runs out, or when one of the supplies of coral colours runs out. In the event that a player plays a card and cannot take the full amount of coral, then the player simply takes what's there and finishes his or her turn. Play then continues around the table until all players have had the same number of turns. In other words, once play passes back to the player with the starfish, he or she does not take another turn and the game ends. Then all players may do a partial score on any cards they have remaining in hand. This is a partial score because the player can only score each pattern once rather than scoring it for every time it appears in the player's reef. Here the player would get 5 points for the 2 stacks of 2 red, but would only get 3 points for this pair even though he or she has 2 possible places where it could have been scored. Players add up all of their scoring tokens and the player with the highest score wins. If tied, the player with the fewest empty spaces in his or her board wins, and if still tied, whoever has the most stacks of 4 coral pieces wins. If still tied, victory is shared.
And that's how to play Reef. We hope that you enjoyed the video and we hope that you enjoy playing.
If you'd like to see the game in action and to get a flavour of how it flows, we have a 1-round playthrough video and you can check that out by clicking on the link in the description below.
If you enjoyed this video, please let us know by clicking the like button. Write your questions or feedback in the comment sections below. You can also join our Facebook group, Meeple University Community, to share your love for board games.
And finally, if you'd like to be among the first notified of what's new from Meeple University, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can click on the Meeple up in the corner to do so, and do hit the bell to be notified of new videos.
Until next time!